At my wedding, my father's speech included every embarrassing story about me. Nothing nice. He finished by raising a toast. Here's hoping you do better as a spouse than as a daughter. I smiled politely, then walked up, took the mic, and said, to understand what happened at my wedding, you need to understand the relationship I had with my father, Richard. I'm Alexandra, 29, and on paper, I should have been the perfect daughter. Graduated with honors, stable career in marketing, and I'd just married the love of my life, Mark, a successful architect my father actually approved of. But in my father's eyes, I was never quite enough. Every achievement came with criticism, every milestone with a reminder of how I could have done better. My father, a highly respected surgeon, believed in excellence above all else. And he made it clear that my excellence consistently fell short of his expectations. My parents, divorced when I was 15. Mom saw the damage his perfectionism was doing, but custody arrangements meant I still spent every other weekend navigating his impossible standards. Part of me hoped my wedding day would be different, that somehow, watching his daughter get married would finally soften him, make him see me as the adult I'd become instead of the disappointment he'd always considered me to be. He's going to behave today, he promised. It's fine. I'm used to it. But as I watched him during the ceremony, I could already see it, that familiar look of critique, mentally cataloging every detail that wasn't perfect. The way my dress didn't quite match his idea of what I should wear. How my vows were too emotional rather than practical. I'd made peace with the fact that I'd never earn his approval. So when the reception started, I told myself I was prepared for whatever backhanded compliment he might offer in his toast. What I wasn't prepared for was the systematic character assassination he had planned instead. As he tapped that glass, calling for attention, I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach, the same one I'd felt countless times throughout my childhood. For those who don't know me, I'm Richard, Alexandra's father, and I have quite a few stories to share about my daughter. Growing up as Richard Walker's daughter meant living in a constant state of evaluation. Dad, look, I got an A on my calculus test. An A dash? What happened to the other points? It wasn't just academics. Nothing was ever good enough. Second, place in the state debate competition? The winner doesn't remember second place. Lead in the school play? Theater is a distraction from real career preparation. Accepted to Cornell with a partial scholarship? If you'd worked harder, you could have gotten a full ride to Harvard. My mother tried to shield me from it, constantly reminding me that I was enough. But after their divorce, the weekends with my father became something I dreaded. You can. Call me anytime. I'll come get you. I know. It's fine. I'm used to it. At my high school graduation, I was valedictorian. I scanned the crowd for my father during my entire speech. He showed up 20 minutes late, took one phone call during my address, and left immediately after the ceremony. Sorry, Alexandra. Hospital. Emergency. We'll celebrate another time. The pattern continued through college and into my adult life. Every family gathering became an opportunity for him to remind me how I was falling short of my potential, how my career choices were disappointing, how I should be more like his colleague's daughter who was already a junior partner at her law firm. Then I met Mark, the first person who made me feel truly seen and valued exactly as I was. With Mark, I started to heal, started to believe that maybe I wasn't the failure my father had always made me feel I was. A bit ostentatious, isn't it? And what exactly are your plans for children? Mark's career isn't exactly stable in this economy. Actually, Dad, we're very happy with our decisions. I didn't come for your approval. Something shifted in me that day. I was done seeking his approval. But old habits die hard, and part of me still hoped that my wedding would be the moment he'd finally see me as worthy. Are you sure you want to ask your father to give a toast? You know how he can be. It's tradition. Besides, maybe just once. He'll rise to the occasion. I convinced myself he wouldn't ruin my special day, that even Richard Walker had limits to his criticism. Looking back, the signs were all there. The way he scrutinized every detail of the wedding plans, the backhanded compliments about my dress, the subtle comments about the cost, and how he would have done things differently. I just never imagined he would use his father of the bride speech to systematically dismantle every shred of confidence I'd built over the years. And then the moment arrived. The microphone was handed to my father, and 200 pairs of eyes turned to him expectantly. When Alexandra was 5 years old, she decided she wanted to be a doctor, just like her dad. Unfortunately, that dream, like many others, didn't quite pan out. And that's when the slow-motion car crash began. 200 guests. 200 witnesses to what should have been a beautiful father-daughter moment. When Alexandra was 5 years old, she decided she wanted to be a doctor, just like her dad. Unfortunately, that dream, like many others, didn't quite pan out. I remember thinking, please, not today. Just this once, be the father I needed. Alexandra was always spirited. As a child, she once decided to give herself a haircut. The night before family photos. Let's just say I'm surprised she didn't pursue a career as a hairstylist. The first few stories seemed innocent enough. Embarrassing childhood anecdotes are standard fare for wedding speeches. But there was something in his tone, that familiar edge of disappointment. Then there was her rebellious phase in high school. While most parents worried about their teenagers sneaking out to parties, I was getting calls from the principal because Alexandra was organizing protests against the school administration. Always fighting the wrong battles instead of focusing on what mattered. I could feel the mood in the room shifting. What had started as polite attention was becoming uncomfortable awareness. My mother looked like she wanted to tackle him to the ground. College was, well, let's say Alexandra chose to follow her passions rather than practical advice. Marketing instead of medicine. A choice that certainly impacted her earning potential. And her choice in apartments. Remember that first place in Brooklyn? The one with the suspicious stain on the ceiling and the neighbor who played the trombone. At 3 a.m. Every story was crafted to seem like a light-hearted anecdote on the surface, but underneath was the same message he'd been sending my entire life. You're not good enough. Dating was another adventure altogether. Before Mark, there was the musician with no actual income. The entrepreneur whose business was selling homemade kombucha at farmers markets. The law student who dropped out to find himself in Thailand. He was going through my entire life, systematically dismantling every choice I'd ever made. And doing it with a smile, like he was sharing cherished memories instead of public humiliation. But finally, she seems to have made at least one good decision. Mark, you're a brave man. Alexandra's apartment might actually stay clean now that you're in the picture. I could feel Mark's hand tightening around mine. See the veins in his temple pulsing. He was furious on my behalf, but this was my father at my wedding. What could anyone do? I suppose what I'm trying to say is, Alexandra has always been determined to do things her way. Stubborn, just like her mother. She's made numerous questionable choices, fallen short of her potential more times than I can count. But today, well, today she's married a man with a stable career and good prospects. So I'd like to propose a toast. Here's hoping you do better as a spouse than as a daughter. 200 people. 200 witnesses to my humiliation. And in that moment, something inside me just snapped. I smiled politely, set down my napkin, and for the first time in my life, I decided I was done being small. 29 years of trying to earn his approval. 29 years of never being enough. And suddenly, I just didn't care anymore. I walked up, took the mic, and said time seemed to slow down. The room was completely silent, yet in my head, it was deafening. My first thought was so familiar it was almost comforting. Just smile. Don't make a scene. Keep the peace. It was the same thought I'd had at every family dinner, every graduation, every milestone when my father had found some way to diminish me. The voice that had kept me small for 29 years. My second thought was about everyone else. 200 guests. My new in-laws. Mark's colleagues. What would they think if I caused a scene at my own wedding? The old Alexandra would have smiled through it, made a self-deprecating joke, laughed it off to ease everyone else's discomfort. But something was different this time. Maybe it was the dress, the ring, the vows I'd just made to honor myself as well as my partner. You look radiant, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect. Do you think Dad will think so? When are you going to stop seeking his approval, Alexandra? When will enough be enough? When would enough be enough? Right now? This moment. This was enough. I felt something rising in me. Not anger, exactly. Something clearer, calmer. Like the fog I'd been living in for decades was finally lifting. I thought about the life ahead of me. The family Mark and I might create someday. Would I want my children to learn that this was acceptable? To watch their mother shrink herself to make an unkind man comfortable? I thought about all the times I'd rehearsed this moment in my head. All the perfect comebacks I'd crafted in the shower, the devastating responses I'd never had the courage to say. And then I heard a voice. My voice, but stronger somehow. If not now, when? In that moment, I made a choice. Not just about this speech, but about the rest of my life. I wasn't going to spend one more second trying to earn the approval of someone who had decided, long ago, that I would never be enough. What I was about to do wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about hurting him the way he'd hurt me. It was about standing in my truth, finally. The strangest part? I wasn't nervous. For the first time in my father's presence, I felt completely calm, completely certain. He expected tears. He expected me to absorb this humiliation like I had absorbed every cutting remark, every dismissal, every comparison throughout my life. But I wasn't that person anymore. Not after today. As my fingers closed around the microphone, I felt 29 years of seeking approval fall away. 29 years of not enough transformed into something new. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to say. What happened next left the entire room speechless. Thank you, Dad, for that illuminating speech. You know, I've spent 29 years trying to earn your approval. 29 years of not enough. And I'd like to thank you for that speech just now. It was clarifying. For those of you who don't know my father well, what you just witnessed was actually quite restrained. Usually, the criticism comes without the veneer of humor. I used to think there was something wrong with me, that if I just tried harder, achieved more, became perfect somehow, he would finally see me. But standing here today, I realized something important. The problem was never me. Dad, I want to thank you. Not for the speech you just gave, but for teaching me a valuable lesson that I'll carry with me into my marriage. You taught me exactly what kind of parent I never want to be. You showed me that true strength isn't found in tearing others down to feel powerful. It's found in lifting them up even when you don't understand their choices. And you showed me how to recognize real love when I finally found it. Because Mark has never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than exactly who I am. So I'd like to propose a different toast. To breaking cycles. To choosing kindness over cruelty. And to recognizing that sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to stop seeking approval from those who are incapable of giving it. To everyone here who has ever felt not enough, you are. You always were. And finally, Dad, I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace. I'm no longer available for your criticism or judgment. From this day forward, if you want to be part of my life, you'll need to see me, really see me, for who I am, not who you wanted me to be. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to have my first dance with my husband. The room erupted in applause. Not the polite kind you give out of obligation, but the genuine kind that comes from witnessing someone claim their power. In that moment, I felt lighter than I had in my entire life. The weight of seeking his approval was finally gone. My father stood frozen for nearly a minute before quietly finding his seat. For the first time in my life, he had no critique to offer, no cutting remark ready. I didn't know it then, but that moment would change everything, not just between my father and me, but in how I moved through the world. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to fight back against toxicity. It's to rise above it, to speak your truth with dignity, and to choose your own happiness over someone else's approval. And that is how I reclaimed my wedding day. The rest of our wedding reception wasn't what I had planned, but it was exactly what I needed. I wish I'd had your courage 20 years ago. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you today. You did it. You finally did it. My father stayed for exactly 43 minutes after my speech. He didn't approach me, didn't try to explain or defend himself. He simply sat there, watching the celebration continue without him at the center. When he left, I felt a momentary pang, not regret, but the final acknowledgement that the father-daughter relationship I'd always hoped for was never going to happen. And surprisingly, that was okay. The days after were complicated. There were texts from relatives, some supportive, others telling me I'd gone too far, that I should apologize. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't second-guessing myself, wasn't measuring my worth through someone else's eyes. 3 weeks after the wedding, I got a letter. Not a text or an email. An actual handwritten letter. My father had never been one for vulnerability or introspection. So when I opened that envelope, I expected justifications, maybe even accusations. What I got instead was two simple words: "I'm sorry." It wasn't a detailed apology. It didn't acknowledge the decades of criticism or emotional neglect. But it was something I'd never received from him before, an admission that he might have been wrong. I didn't rush to forgive him. Healing isn't that simple. Instead, I wrote back with boundaries, clear, non-negotiable boundaries about how I was willing to be treated going forward. It's been 6 months since my wedding day. My relationship with my father is evolving. There are still awkward moments, still times when I can see him biting back criticism. But there's something new there too, a respect that wasn't present before. The difference is that now, I no longer need his approval to feel whole. I've stopped trying to earn the kind of love that should have been freely given. Standing up to my father at my wedding wasn't about revenge. It was about finally acknowledging my own worth after decades of being told I wasn't enough.